Two scientists are investigating a cave located 1,000 feet below the Appalachian Trail in Pennsylvania. They find an unexplored cave system after breaking through old rock. They are scared to see a number of winged creatures fly out of the cavern when they hear an odd noise. The explorers attempt to get away, but the creatures quickly encircle and killing them. Ally is trying her hardest to ignore the cruel guys who make fun of her hearing loss as she wraps up another school day in Montclair. Fortunately, even though she can read lips, she can still communicate with her best friend Rob, who has learned sign language. He walks her home while holding hands and is incredibly encouraging. Ally's brother Jude insults her as soon as she gets home, while the family dog Otis greets her warmly. In addition to berating her for being late, her mother Kelly makes fun of her for her relationship with Rob. Ally notes that Otis's hair is rising up, as if there's something terrible outside, as he suddenly starts barking. Ally notices some smoke in the distance and a number of helicopters flying over the neighborhood that night. She discovers that her grandma Lynn is smoking because of her weak lungs, something she is not supposed to do. Ally swears she won't reveal it to Kelly. After that, Ally watches her parents talk and says she was in a car accident 3 years ago and lost both her hearing and her paternal grandparents, but she feels that her parents suffered more than anybody else. Before going to bed, she looks at a message Rob left her on her table. It contains a video of a mysterious flock of birds soaring across the night sky. Hugh, her father, interrupts her out of the blue and makes fun of Rob as well. After that, Ally gets ready for bed, but Otis is nervous. Later on in the night, Hugh's best buddy Glenn and the family are watching the news in the living room when Kelly wakes Ally up. Attacks are occurring in many U.S. cities, and the danger is gradually expanding throughout the nation. They initially blame the terrorists, but soon after, cell phone footage of disfigured corpses lying around the city becomes viral. In one video, a mother tapes her son's mouth shut and posts a sign warning others not to make noise. Suddenly, they hear a loud explosion and the family rushes outdoors to witness jets flying past. Upon re-entering the building, they witness the news broadcasting a recently released video from the exploration team, which verifies that several prehistoric creatures have broken free from a cave and are currently assaulting humans. Out of nowhere, the television switches to the emergency alert system, urging people to remain indoors with secured doors and windows, and to avoid making any noise. Ally mentions how cities are too noisy, prompting the family to pack up and move away from the city. Glenn and Jude depart in one vehicle while the rest join Otis in the second vehicle. While they are leaving, they observe a blanket of smoke covering the entire city. The train has stopped in the tunnels beneath the city, and some people are stuck inside trying not to say anything. The baby starts to cry, and the other passengers take her away from the mother so they may kick her out of the train. The mother grabs her baby desperately and says she will go along. Silently, the mother and daughter get off the train and walk through the tunnel. But the creatures materialize as soon as baby drops her pacifier by accident, causing her to cry once more. The mother begins to run after the child, but she cannot run quickly enough, and the train's occupants see their deaths. Returning to the family, they learn over the radio that the death toll has risen to alarming proportions. Rob tells Ally on her tablet that his family chose to stay at home as per the advice of the authorities. Ally walks Otis so he may urinate when the family eventually stops at a gas station to get supplies. Unexpectedly, Otis begins to bark at a man with a gun who demands the family for their car while firing shots into the sky. As Hugh is about to hand over the keys, Otis jumps in and bites him after Glenn shoots the man in the leg. After Glenn seizes the man's weapon, the family drives off, hardly giving a thought to the man's possible fate. Jude soon becomes so nervous from the tension and terror that he decides to switch cars and go with his parents. As Ally keeps up with the news on her iPad, she finds out that the creatures have been termed vesps, which is derived from the Spanish word for wasps, due to the way they swarm. Hugh abruptly applies the brakes, narrowly missing the crash. They choose to venture off-road and away from civilization because the road is congested with traffic. They make their way past a fence and onto a desolate road as the radio continues to list all the states that are under attack. Ally sees horrifying pictures of all the disasters that have occurred throughout the nation on her tablet. Glenn has to try to avoid the deer when they suddenly appear from the woods and obstruct her path in order to get off the road. Glenn is stuck inside his automobile as it rolls down a hill and lands on its roof. Hugh rushes to assist, but no matter how hard he pulls, the door stays locked, and Glenn can't be pulled out the window because his leg is caught. When Kelly tries to contact 911 and no one answers, Hugh tries the door once more without success using a tool. Accepting his fate, Glenn asks Hugh to bring his guns, and after he gets them, he orders the family to depart without him. Hugh hesitates and says he'll come back to help. Otis begins to bark as soon as the family gets back in the vehicle. Ally urges her dad to switch off the engine after noticing his hair sticking up and recalling the no-noise warning. When Otis notices it, he barks even louder, which draws additional Vesps and causes them to repeatedly hit the windows. Glenn hears Lynn scream, and she can hear the Vesps roaring. He opens fire in an attempt to defend the family, which prompts the Vesps to encircle his automobile and swiftly murder him. Hugh tries to quiet Otis, but he still barks. Disregarding his daughter's cries, Hugh is forced to shove Otis out of the car. The family is hesitant to start the car as, although it is peaceful, there are still some vigilantes in the area. But, they are unable to stay there indefinitely, so Hugh gently exits the vehicle to look about. In the instant it takes Lynn to get her inhaler during her asthma episode, a Vesp manages to land on top of the automobile. Hugh picks up the tool he dropped earlier and throws it forward slowly enough that the Vesp follows after it without detecting him. Hugh comes to the car after the Vesp takes off, explaining in sign language that the animals are blind and are haunted by sound. The family decides to only communicate through sign language and to turn off all electronics. Hugh then asks Lynn for her lighter, and Kelly is shocked to learn that her mother smokes. Hugh approaches Glenn's car and sets it on fire after bidding the corpse farewell. As soon as the car starts to burn, the Vesps surround it and perish in the explosion. The family can now continue their journey on foot. Lynn has to be careful not to make noise whenever she takes her inhaler or has problems breathing because the long walk exacerbates her symptoms. Hugh takes advantage of the opportunity to apologize to Ally for what happened to Otis and explain that he had no option. Although Kelly is unwilling to add to the day's misery, Lynn urges Kelly to finally tell the kids that she has lung cancer. Jude spots a house nearby with his binoculars, so the family goes there. By the time they get to the fence, it is nighttime, and Hugh accidentally rings a bell as he tries to open it. Soon after, a Vesp appears on the fence. Her speech instantly draws a group of Vesps who shove her into the well in an attempt to swiftly kill her. In their search for a different entrance, the family comes across a drainage pipe close by. Hugh ventures forth first and squeezes through the conduit, failing to notice a snake concealed in the earth. Once he crosses across, he goes inside to make sure it's vacant and then waves for his family to come inside. This time, the snake emerges from the pipe and hisses at the group as they begin to crawl through it together. A Vesp hears the hiss produced by the pipe and flies in to catch the snake before it can attack. Kelly sustains a leg wound when a second Vesp approaches her from the opposite end at the same moment. Hugh hears her cry and quickly turns on the woodchipper, killing every Vesp that flies straight into the device. Kelly is then carried inside the house by the family. As a former nurse, Lynn decides to cut Kelly's pants in order to treat the wound, which turns out to be more serious than they had anticipated. Kelly goes to sleep, and Hugh and Lynn have a drink together. Rob, looking unkempt and covered in dirt, is contacted by Ally using her iPad upstairs. Ally tries to invite him to join her in the cabin when he informs her that his parents have passed away, but their communication breaks there. Ally discovers the next morning on the television that a lot of people are misinterpreting the Vesps as religious symbols and are even setting atheists on fire. Upon observing that Kelly's wound is becoming worse, Lynn informs the others that Kelly requires antibiotics in order to survive. Hugh retrieves a scythe from the basement and prepares to head out with Ally. Jude asks to go with him, but Hugh tells him to protect his grandmother. Then Hugh and Ally gently open the front gate, taking care not to trigger the bell again. Hugh fastens the door to the floor to prevent any additional sounds, and the two carefully go out the little aperture. With all the Vesps flying around, the two decide to hike to the nearest hamlet. While traveling, they come across dead bodies with injuries that imply the murderer was not the only one. When they go to town and find it empty and stained with blood, they don't realize the Reverend is watching them from a distance. Hugh and Ally have to go through the back door because the front door of the pharmacy is locked. The smell of rotting bodies, those slain while attempting to steal supplies, hits them as soon as they enter. Ally examines the bodies more closely and finds that the Vesps have placed eggs inside of them while Hugh grabs the medications. Ally gasps as a baby Vesp bursts the egg and splatters liquid on her face. After hearing her, 3 large Vesps settle on the shelves and wait for another sound. Hugh asks for a mop when Ally looks around and notices a fire alarm. Hugh raises it to sound the alarm and ignites it on fire after Ally delivers him one silently. They run into the Reverend on their way out of town, and he pursues them even though they try to avoid him. In order to have a private conversation, the Reverend asks them to join his flock, the Hushed, by displaying his writing in his notebook. The Reverend hisses at Ally and Hugh, showing that he has lost his tongue, as they decline the offer and move on. Kelly feels better after taking the medication when they get back to the house. Hugh tries to tune into the TV for further news, but the signal is weak. The final things Ally tells him from her tablet are that CNN is transmitting from a bunker with a spotty signal. Jude tries to pass the time by playing cards, and Hugh gives him a stake so he can take up fighting. The Reverend shows up outside the house one afternoon with a group of people who are all their tongues. When Hugh emerges, he begs them to leave the family alone, but the Reverend persists in inviting him around and brings up Ally's fertility. Hugh pulls out a gun in a fit of rage to threaten them, but the Reverend knows he won't shoot because the commotion will draw the Vesps. The group departs after saying a silent prayer together. Later on, Rob sends Ally a note informing her that he is traveling to the icy north, where survivors have established a haven. Sadly, the communication is lost once more before Rob can offer her directions. Hugh hears a commotion in the middle of the night, and when the family goes outside, they find a female standing by the door. She's missing her tongue, they find out after letting her in and asking her questions. The girl was sent by the pastor, and upon opening her jacket, she finds numerous phones fastened to her body. Simultaneously, Ally spots a shadow in her window and upon closer inspection discovers that a phone has been attached to the glass. Unexpectedly, the girl's phone and the others around begin to ring, sending the Vesps hurtling towards the home and smashing into the windows. Ally escapes the room and shuts the door just in time. Hugh and Jude attempt to block the window since the Vesps are about to shatter the glass, and the women go to the cellar to shelter. 3 members of the Hushed are waiting for them there, and they charge Ally right away in an attempt to take her. Kelly tries to use a hammer to strike them, but they simply shove her aside and make off with both the little girl and her daughter. Lynn follows them, pushing them to the ground at the same time Ally bites their hands to make them drop her. Lynn cries as Ally flees, drawing the attention of several Vesps who instantly kill her and the majority of the kidnappers. The family emerges and sobs for Lynn, but Ally is once again taken by the preacher and his more reserved entourage. Kelly, Hugh, and Jude pursue the gang in a desperate attempt to save her, not thinking twice about stabbing anyone who dares to defend themselves. After being set free, Ally enters the battle and uses a large rock to strike a man in the head. The Reverend stabs Hugh with a knife when Hugh tackles him and tries to suffocate him. Hugh then strikes the man in the head in retaliation, knocking him out. Hugh beats the Reverend to death with his weapon after Kelly takes out the knife from his wound. The family leaves toward the north the following day, staying only for the night to relax. They eventually ascend a mountain and, by following the survivors' indications, locate the shelter. When their ally gets too close to their new house, Rob helps her learn how to shoot a bow, and they go hunting together. Ensure that you subscribe and enable notifications in order to view more videos similar to this one. Thanks for watching.